Professor William Jacobson is a clinical professor of law and director of the Securities Law Clinic over at, what's your university again up there?
It's a small university, Cornell University.
Cornell, that's the one. Cornell University. Right into the microphone there, Professor. And his blog is Legal Insurrection. And it's a great blog. I go to it every day. It's something that you should bookmark because he looks at legal issues and constitutional issues, government issues, but also things, crime issues all through the prism of somebody right of center, which is something rare in academia.
Right.
So we're thrilled to have you because it seems like there's a constant conversation going on just a few miles up the road here at Capitol Hill, and that is Republicans want to do something, Democrats block it, or the president blocks it, the president does something that the Congress thinks is unconstitutional, and the remedy seems to be we're going to take the guy to court. Is that really the only remedy? Is that all that Congress can do short of impeachment?
Well, it's not the only remedy, but it is one. And it's been working so far in Texas. Whether it continues to work remains to be seen. But the president's immigration plan, his executive action, is on hold right now until he convinces another court to reignite it.
Now, yesterday, the president reiterated again and said, I expect to prevail on this. The law is on my side. Now, he's a constitutional law professor. I've seen a picture of him with a chalkboard and everything, Professor. What does he know about the Constitution that you don't know over there at Cornell?
Well, I don't think he knows anything about it, to tell you the truth. He certainly hasn't demonstrated it so far. But interestingly enough is that the whole Texas case wasn't decided on constitutional grounds. The judge basically said you didn't follow the rules you need to follow when you're going to make new rules. And therefore he said, he may eventually follow those rules, and the judge may say, well, now that you followed them, it's unconstitutional.
Right.
But judge says you don't even get in the door.
And just as a quick follow-up, because this is being appealed and eventually, it could go to a much higher court, what is the significance of this federal judge not ruling on constitutional grounds at this stage?
Well, the significance is that he has picked a procedural ground which probably is very strong. I think it is very strong, and so
that always seems to stand at this level on solid ground compared to a judge at his level saying, "Oh, this is unconstitutional."
That's right, and there's very little law in the area that he ruled on. This is not something that happens very frequently, so there's not like 20 cases that the government can point to and say, you're wrong. And in fact, a lot of the cases he did cite were notoriously liberal cases and liberal principles about rulemaking and limitations on the executive branch.
Yeah, it looks, though, however, in this battle over funding for the Department of Homeland Security, which is all tied up in this, that they're going to cave. Trey Gowdy was on the floor of a hearing room the other day, and he made comments about the importance of following the rule of law. Take a listen to this little clip.
And I'm going to say this, and then we'll finish. We'll say this to those who benefit from the president's policies. You may be willing to allow the end to justify the means in this case. You may well like the fact that the president has abused prosecutorial discretion and conferred benefits in an unprecedented way. You may benefit from the president's failure to enforce the law today, but I'll make you this promise. There will come a day where you will cry out for the enforcement of the law. There will come a day where you long for the law to be the foundation of this republic.
These are not just archaic arguments that are held in a court of law. This is about the Constitution and what a president may or may not do under our Constitution and our form of government. These are big issues.
Well, they sure are, and we don't elect a king. We don't elect perhaps a queen one day. We elect a president who's very limited within his authority, and the president clearly has exceeded his authority here. I don't think there's any serious argument that he hasn't, but the judge didn't have to get to that. The judge basically said that you don't get to pick your seat in the theater. You don't even get to come into the theater because you don't have a ticket. And that's essentially what he said to the president. But I think it's absolutely true, and it's a point I've made a lot, which is what goes around comes around. And if you're going to allow a president just to say, I don't like this law, so I'm not going to enforce it, and I don't like it so much I'm going to change it on my own, then any liberals out there who like this policy, that's one day going to happen to you.
I mean, and that is really what's going on here. It's not just, okay, we're going to ignore the law. We're going to change the law without Congress's involvement.
That's right. He bestowed benefits upon people. He didn't just decide not to deport them. He said, you're now here legally. He set up a whole new process to register. He conferred benefits on them, and none of that is in the legislation. In fact, it's completely contrary to the law.
He's even set up a new name for them. I don't know if you saw this. They're no longer referred to as illegal immigrants, illegal aliens, or undocumented even isn't good enough. They're now called Americans in Waiting.
Oh,
I'm not kidding.
Well, I wish you were
really
kidding. I had not heard that. I wish you were
Yeah.
kidding. But that's just how perverse it's all become, that the president just does whatever he wants.
So listen, our guest is Professor William Jacobson from Legal Insurrection, and he's a ton smarter than I am, but we do have one thing in common, and that is we're both fans of Mark Levin. I've heard you wax poetic about the great one as well. I heard Levin last night make a pretty interesting point in terms of the political angles of this. He knows the law, obviously. He thinks ultimately, though, for Republicans in Congress to constantly be relying on judges to kind of do the dirty work for them and to sort of adjudicate this, as judges would do as adjudicators, that ultimately is not a winning strategy for Republicans. Are there any other tools at their disposal that they could be using?
Sure. They could block all of his nominees. They could say, fine, maybe we can't stop your immigration plan, but you will not get a single more judge on the bench the rest of your term. The Senate has the power to do that. You won't get any appointees other than national security.
Hold up the Attorney General's nomination.
Hold up the Attorney General's.
But they don't seem to be willing to do that.
They're not willing to do it. And ultimately what they have is the power of the purse. But they're scared to death of the media portraying a quote-unquote government shutdown, even though we all know it won't be a government shutdown. They'll just do some high-profile things that get media attention. So they're scared to death of that. And until the Republicans get a backbone and are willing to stand up to the president, he's just going to continue to roll right over them.
Yeah, there's no good outcome here. There is no good outcome as long as they're unwilling to fight that fight.
Right, and there's no good outcome because we have a president who considers himself something of an emperor and something of somebody who he wants to transform the country. That's his motivation. He doesn't care what it's going to take to do it. He's going to create facts on the ground. So what if a year from now it gets to the U.S. Supreme Court, but if he's legalized 5 million people, try to take that away from them.
If you ring that bell, you can't unring it.
Yeah.
You can't
put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Quickly, the other big court decision that this town is going to be talking about over the next several months is the Obamacare argument in front of Supreme Court, and this has to do with states utilizing this funding from the federal government if they have not set up a state exchange. It's a little arcane, but it could be critical to the undoing of the law, yes?
Sure. What that is that Obamacare is unaffordable to almost everybody unless you get a government subsidy, a federal government subsidy. And the law was written in such a way that you only get that subsidy if you sign up on a state exchange. But very few states set up exchanges. So what the feds did was said, well, okay, the law says that, but we're going to give you the federal money even if you sign up on the federal exchange.
Wow.
And so what's going to happen is if the court rules that the law is what it is, maybe it makes sense, maybe it doesn't, but that's not for the court. It's written this way.
Well, it's not for the court, but they often sort of, I mean, look what happened the first Obamacare ruling. It was never written that the individual mandate was a tax, but somehow the Chief Justice discovered that it was.
It was a tax.
Well, is it possible the Chief Justice could see this as a do-over?
I hope so.
Well said. All right, Professor William Jacobson, again from Cornell University. Legalinsurrection.com is the blog that you need to read on a daily basis. Thanks for joining us.